tsara ke kgantsa Michael ka go ra go a tingela standing ka sa gona go tla.
I am so honored to be a part of a panel that is going to be discussing this controversial yet interesting topic, and I am hoping to learn a lot from them and from you guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, guys. Now we move along to. Oh, okay. We do have the media amongst us. So we have Lami Chaba from Yavana FM and Botswana. Lami. And we have Mapula Mlapong from representing Telegraph for Sunday Standard. Protocol is highly observed. We are getting now to the crux of our meeting, which is to allow our panelists to express themselves. And I will throw a bit of questions to them, but center stage. This is a panel discussion, so you guys are going to be given to chip in guess it so much I was right? Since let me change the tide now. Let me begin this side. I will give you at least 5 minutes to express yourself. And then we'll take you to task after you do that. You can come. Yes, let's welcome to the stage underground doctor to take us in.
Many issues have been annihilated to be brought forth before the public, and this is one of the most controversial issues, and it needs delicate approaches. And with that, it also needs someone to stand firmly and articulate the understanding in order to represent a fair group of the public as to what is expected or what is perceived to be what. Now, sexual economics is a concept that has been misconstrued to be an equal to prostitution. That, on my stance, as a liberalist feminist, I would have to disagree. But before we get into why, or the nitty-gritties of why I would have to disagree, let me go into laying the ground. What is sexual economics? It is a theory, people. And this theory adopts the model of economics and its elements to describe human behavior. And by human behavior, we're talking of both male and female. It has an assumption. It theorizes that sex is a female resource that men are willing to trade resources for in order to just gain sexual access to women. Precisely so. It is, from this context, seen as a transactional field of gaining resources in order to attain sexual access. But that's the thing around the whole subject. Sexuality is not just bared into sex. Sexuality can talk about other elements that speak to defining a person having to stand out and say, I'm a heterosexual or I'm a homosexual. And with that being the case, this is where the misconception of what the term price comes in and causes the confusion of sexual economics to be seen as prostitution. The price in the prostitution context is defined. It's seen as money. It's money terms. It's seen as money terms because the ultimate goal for prostitution is to gain a leverage of income. But when you talk about sexual economics, the price is rather having a broader meaning. Broader meaning in the sense that you can have the trade of resources having to mean you want certain benefits of being heard, communication benefits, or being in a status of a relationship, being understood, being esteemed, and the priority of the money context, which is an eventual thing, as usual, is not the top priority as in the prostitution section. So, money is the least of the worries in the sexual economics. It actually comes as a pairing. It can come as money and then come also with emotional affection. But it's not really the priority, and that is the distinction between the two. Now, as liberalists, we do not agree with the notion of sexual economics. Why are we saying this? Because we stand firmly to talk about issues of inequality. We stand firmly and say that we don't want to be oppressed. And we see it fit that the whole notion of sexual economics is seen in the social contract of family setups. And the family setups, they actually encourage the vivid exchange of resources by oppressing the female to submit or to be subjugated by the male so that they can be able to gain these resources that we are alluding to today. So, we don't agree with the notion because it bears what we are against, and that is the notion of oppression or the notion of inequality as it may. So we view it to be dehumanizing the female. We see people having to see us as a source, like our bodies are a good on a shelf. You can use and finish, and it appears as if it was never there. But that's the thing. Our bodies are seen and perceived to be precious, and we value them, and we don't believe in the notion of them being oppressed. Another thing is that we don't agree with this, essentially because it's part of the patriarchal society. The patriarchal society in promoting sexual economics and having to make sure that women subjugate themselves to their men is not what we are for in order for them to get resources. Why can't we live in a household and I be understood? Why can't we live in a household and I be able to gain those resources, not necessarily because we would have to have sex? Those are the kind of questions that we actually bring up. And we find it's a bit hostile. It's hostile bringing up wars on gender inequality, which is exactly the basis of why we are against it. If we're going to say gender equality, of which gender equality is well understood as giving equal opportunity, then this notion that oppresses women is definitely giving the variance between men and women. And essentially that would have to say that we are unequal. We wouldn't be given the equal opportunity. I'm always supposed to be subjugated, or I'm always supposed to be oppressed, and I'm always supposed to be listening to what you have to say in the interest that I want certain resources. In our view, sexual economics, in as much as it has so much assumptions that assume that women have the power and the leverage over sex, that we are the ones who have the value pack and men don't have the value pack when it comes to sexual matters, we don't see it as the case. It's an orientation that we see in our society, and it's proven vividly contrary to what the assumptions and the elements or contentions that are laid forth have been given. So, there are various things that actually influence sexual economics. One of them is culture, one of them is the principle of least interest, and a whole other aspects. So at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, sexual economics is not something that is far-fetched. If we're going to talk about resources and the gain of sexual access, the only difference here is that in reality, the case is not that we seem to have the upper hand in society as women when it comes to that decision of sex. The truth is, in the home setup, how we've been molded by culture, our African culture is to subjugate ourselves in order to access these resources. And by subjugating ourselves, we allow the man to make the bigger decision of when and where, or probably how we should have that sexual intercourse. We don't agree with the notion. And thank you.
Thank you. Let's welcome again to stage Tepo, who fairly shares the same sentiment.
Okay. Good evening once again. So today we have the elephant in the room, which is sexual economics, and I am going to try and address it in my own opinion and views. And for us to be able to understand the concept or to discuss something, we need to understand what it is really, because a lot of people have different opinions without even understanding the concept as a whole. So for me, I went out to look for a definition of sexual economics. So what is sexual economics? According to a sexual economics theory by Brewster and Voss, the names are very difficult. Sex economy is defined as the idea of how participators think, feel, behave, and give feedback during sex or relevant sexual events. It just states that men and women's thoughts, preferences, and behavior follow the fundamental economic principle. So this theory applies the logic and principles of economics marketplaces to sexual intercourse among heterosexual couples. So in simplicity, sexual economics is when we define sex or sexual activities as a marketplace deal in heterosexual relations, and states that sex is what women have and what men want. Like Musitana Hapa just said that sex here is viewed as a woman having that resource and men wanting the sex. So it's what women have and what men want. So it uses a theory of social exchange where people are willing to give up something that they have to get what they believe they will benefit them the more. So it includes this theory of social exchange, whereby it states that people will exchange resources. I want the sex, I can give you the money. I want the sex, I can give you the attention, and all those things. So today I stand here with the view of being against the topic sexual economics, simply basing my arguments on cultural and social views as a nation, Botswana. So in Botswana, we are still pretty much influenced by culture and some social values, and as much as we can deny it, but it is still a part of who we are. And in many instances, this social norms has been keeping us afloat. Now, the question would be, how ready is Botswana as a society? How ready is it to accept social economy? How ready are we as a nation to accept that this can actually be viewed as a part of an economic system? So, to me, actually trying to embrace this might actually bring civil unrest and moral decay, because still our country is still rooted in cultural, it still takes into consideration our cultural values and norms. So in regulating sexual economies or trying to embrace this concept in our country, it will mean that now a girl child may find it as an easy way to to success in life. Probably things like education will no longer be a thing to pursue as a girl child because you simply have a resource that is at your disposal that you can use to get money. What will be the use of you going to school and then not finding a job while you have a vagina, which is your resource, or while you have any other thing that you can use to get these resources from this man? And so this there will be skill deficit where people will no longer acquire necessary skills to drive the economy, but will take probably maybe sex work, because sex work is one of the examples of what happens in the sexual economy, and they would embrace that as a way of survival, and there will be skills deficits. And we understand that we live in a global community and our values and principles may be challenged by these developing trends and practices adopted from other societies. But fact is, societies are not the same and their level of tolerance is not the same. But to accept sex economy based on our failures as a country to maybe create employment for these people who want to embrace this or what is unfair and irrational, because when I look at it, sex economy has more costs than benefits. Yes, we would embrace the benefits of sex economy, that perhaps these people are looking for these resources and they can get it by offering the resource that is at their disposal. But what are we saying about the cost? I think the costs are much greater than the benefits of this whole concept. So when I talk about the costs, I talk about things like, we always think there's HIV prevalences are high, and in this concept of sexual economy, whereby, for example, when you take prostitution, if you would like to regulate this, then we know it's a business, and these people might take even risk to expose themselves to this new infections and all the diseases that comes with maybe sexual activities. And this will still go back to the government that we claim we do not have regard for because it is our personal choice. But at the end of the day, we live in a social context whereby at the end of the day, whether it's your individual choice or not, it comes back to the communities that you are in, and also come back to your own government as well. So we acknowledge the fact that young people or anybody else who embraces this concept of maybe sexual economics might not be there by choice. They find themselves in circumstances that would force them to actually engage maybe in prostitution or transactional sex or anything. But are we saying that, are we in the worst case scenario? Are we so hopeless that we think there is nothing that we can really do to cap all these challenges that we are facing as a nation, rather than to resort to maybe commercializing sex or regulating prostitution? So, and I believe that even this concept will victimize those who are vulnerable. Take, for example, if you are going to commercialize sex, we are probably going to have brothels, pins, and maybe this will subject these young girls who will be exchanging their resource for some other resources. And it will mean that they are overpowered by these people who will be regulating the whole thing. And that is victimizing them. Like literally, we are making victims out of them. And the one thing that I really wanted to understand was that if at all we are to embrace this concept, how are we going to regulate it as a nation? Because if you're talking about sexual economics, we are probably maybe looking at how it will contribute to the economy of a nation as well. So while I was studying for this night, I came across a point whereby, sexual activities under sexual economics would probably empower the woman at a microeconomic level. It's time. Okay. So that is basically it. If these activities, will they even add value to our economy as a nation? So I stand here to say I'm actually against sexual economics. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stefan. They've said quite a lot, but before we can grill them if we may, let me keep to the side of Redipo. The reason why I get a Redipo short film is because we are appreciating the sale. Some of the reason why you guys are gathered here, I think it's fair that we attribute it to her for generating that buzz. Social business. So, madam, I went now to say again.
Thank you, Speaker. Well, I guess that this theory has been elaborated, but maybe just to provide my understanding of what the theory is all about, the sexual economics theory, I've arranged a lot of notes. I hope I'll be able to finish in 5 minutes' time. It is a theory that suggests that women exchange sex for financial resources from men. And I find the theory totally problematic. I reject it in total. It is outdated. It is very problematic. And I will advance reasons as to why I believe that it is very problematic. First, the reason is that the theory has the potential of portraying women as people who are evil, as competitors, as backstabbers, as manipulative people. And somehow I submit that it portrays women as also their own enemies. In what way? The theory suggests that sex sellers will collude and compete more than the buyers, that is more than men. And then this collusion will take the form of a cartel. That is, people will collude and then agree that this is perhaps maybe the price at which sex can be sold and so on and so on. But then what I find problematic is that while there is that agreed notion that you cannot give sex to your boyfriend until he takes you to a saloon and this and this and this. that is the agreed price. The problem is here is that women will still agree on this general notion of pressurizing women to withhold sex until or unless the price is high or unless the drink that is on the table is sweet. But while themselves, because of the notion of self-interest, while themselves personally undercut that agreed price of the cartel to actually favor their preferred sexual customer. So I find it first problematic in that sense. And then secondly, I find it problematic in the sense that the theory, for instance, it doesn't speak anything to one thing that is fundamental. You talk about sex. You can have sex, for instance, casual sex, whatever you call it, but maybe in conservative societies like ours, you have sex maybe within marriage, right? And then you find out that, it doesn't speak to issues of ownership of property. For instance, what do you call it, marrying in community of property and so on. And then with the notion of marriage, generally it is agreed that it is driven by love. And then with the notion of love, it is profound in this sense, in the very sense that it has no contingencies. You love someone in spite of material things and so on and so on. So I find that this is also a serious limitation. A good theory goes on to address the many dynamics that may surround it. And actually, speaking of love, again, something that I find problematic with the theory is that it has a primitive understanding of sex, in the sense that it takes people backward to the medieval ages where people are just having sex in an anarchical fashion. That that is not always the case, because sometimes people are driven by love and having sex and so on and so on. That is why it's problematic to differentiate between the question of love and desire, because when you love someone, you kill that desire. In what sense? In the sense that love presupposes that, oh, it's me and Michelle. I'm sorry to say Michelle here. But sorry, Michelle, but it's me and Michelle, and then the oneness of the person who loves and the person who is loved, so that the two become one and so on and so forth. So in that context, that is why even in psychoanalysis, cheating is a problematic thing, because you don't cheat or go and have sex with someone else because you don't love them or something. And strictly speaking, with men, it's like we are automatically destined to be cheaters. But then I want to proceed. Okay, I want to proceed without diverting a lot. But I feel that the notion of having sex without loving someone is quite problematic, and I feel that because of the confusion of love and desire, or the sex drive, the theory could have taken could have made efforts to actually address the drive or the sexual desire. You know, why am I saying this? Because when you, and I will use psychoanalysis again, because when we have sex, let's say you have sex with yourself, that is masturbation. let us say it's masturbation. But then if you have sex with someone that you don't have, that also falls in the category of masturbation, but now with another person. And that is why I submit that the theory could have taken efforts to actually look at this other notion, marriage, and then locate also love with respect to desire or the sex drive. And then again, the theory provides this hostile view of heterosexual relationships. Why? Because now it seems like women are manipulative people. They are people who are financially dependent on men and so on and so on. And also it seems like women become their own enemies in the sense that they suppress their own sexualities. Why am I saying that? Because this theory says sex is like any other good in the marketplace, which is subject to the demands of supply and to the market forces of supply and demand. And then when there are more women than men, it means that the price of sex will be low because there are so many women, and then the demand is. So what then they say there? They say that the solution to that is for women to restrict the supply of sex, reduce the supply of sex. That is, don't give men sex. So you don't give men sex so that the demand reduces and that the price goes high. And then feminism in totality speaks to issues of freedom in sexuality, to say your sexuality is not dictated by men, is not determined by men, and so on. So I find this theory playing right into the hands of patriarchy, because now when you say reduce the supply of sex so that men can increase their prices of making that exchange, I find it playing right into the hands of patriarchy, and I therefore dismiss it again. Let me proceed to dismiss on the third point. Yeah, for instance again, this theory neglects the historical timeline. For instance, a patriarchal society from the very olden ages has been a society that denies women of equal citizenship, equal rights, equal opportunities, and so on and so on. So all those circumstances ended up forcing women to engage in activities that force them to exchange sex for financial resources. So if we are in 2020 and then we are, the struggle we suppose is for the true emancipation of women as a radical Marxist feminist, to talk about the material forces that force women into sexual exchanges. I find the theory therefore problematic in the sense that it sustains patriarchy and it doesn't address the root of the matter in what actually gets women to exchange sex for financial resources. and it also ignores the historical timelines of this patriarchal society. I'm also saying that this theory also tends to encourage competition within women. I will give you an example. You take Bofepuso as a federation for workers' unions and so on. 70% of the membership, they are women, and then 30% they are men. But you find that more than 80% of the leadership of Bofepuso, they are men. Why? Because people always say women compete against each other, So now this theory encourages competition between women. In what way? Because women compete amongst each other to beautify themselves, to make themselves more beautiful, and so on and so on. They gossip against other women. It is in the theory. I took efforts to try and read it. They gossip, they damage each other's reputations so that they emerge as the most suitable candidates for saving. And then on the other side, men now emerge as people who don't just see themselves as competitors, but also as friends, in the sense that men may agree to actually buy a pack of beer or something, just so that they can do that exchange between financial resources or what and sex. And then the theory also neglects the very fact that, for instance, take America. 30% of American wives who are in dual career marriages. The theory also neglects the very fact that 30% of American wives in dual career marriages earn more than their husbands, and that the situation of women have been changing over the years. For instance, the issue of low wages of women. Nowadays, women get education, money, and status, and as a result, they become less needful of using sex as an exchange for financial resources. And again, in today's world, you find out that men express more interest in the women's financial capacity and then women now show little interest in men's financial capacity. It now becomes very clear that when sex is being used as a commodity, it now becomes clear that sex as a commodity suppresses women's freedom in different ways. I still have a few notes, I don't know. I don't know, but let me just quickly, I promise I'll keep quiet after this. Let us look at the structure of our society today. One might as well be persuaded to say men are, creators, and then women are demanders. In what way? In the sense that it is the men who tend to be working hard to create big institutions, big multi-billion companies. And then it is the women who always say, let us have this affirmative action, and so on and so on. So while now there is a gap between what opportunities women should have in closing that gap financially, you will find out that there will be a fraction of very high powerful women, or very high powerful men who will actually stand in support of this theory, because it is playing right into maintaining the status quo and providing a sustaining ground for patriarchy. I still have so many points, but I guess I will get more opportunities.
Thank you so much, Reverend Kosha. Before I call forth Meresio, let me move from here. A revered journalist, come photographer, Telephone Charles. What can you say? Sorry for that. I wasn't trying to do anything funny. There's Irene Sean from The Guardian. There's this gentleman here, Ramit Sagai, from the League Sun. I think we already know here that Resebo has a dissenting view, because 3 of our panelists, well, it seems they are against making money.
Both English and Setswana, as blunt as I possibly can. As it seems, it appears I'm the only person in this panel sexual economics. So I think it's a fair thing for me to maybe explain to you what a sex worker is, what types of sex workers we have, why people get into sex work, and the legality of sex work itself. So sex work, it's between 2 adults. Let's start there. The bottom line is it's between 2 adults, 2 consenting adults. The other one says, I am offering you a blowjob for 50 pula, and then they agree on the price, they implement that sex work. Because more often people confuse sex work with they end up maybe trying to violate sex workers through rape and non-consensual, let me not call it non-consensual sex because it's rape. Many times people tend to start violating sex workers because people assume because I agreed to have sex with a certain man at a certain price, then people can just come in and out. They don't need my consent to do that. As long as they have the money, then they assume they can start having sex with me. That's not what sex work is, that's rape. Sex work is consent of 2 adults agreeing with each other. Let's have sex, you pay me this amount, or you give me this type of remuneration, right? Also, I prefer using the term sex work instead of prostitution for 2 reasons, right? The first reason is there's a lot of stigma around prostitution, loosely translated to uipekisa. You understand? So sex work recognizes that, firstly, sex on its own, sex work is work. Prostitution doesn't recognize the word sex work, the term sex work as technical work. You understand? So I prefer calling it sex work instead of prostitution for those reasons. CBD. Like I also said, prostitution, the word prostitution, associated with so much stigma, so much violence. It's perceived to be a very demeaning word. That's why I choose the word. I prefer to use the word sex work instead of prostitution. So people have engaged in sex work for a couple of reasons. A basic reason for starters would be the economic state. Because you find that most of our women, let me use the case study of Botswana, women are the most affected by poverty. That's a fact. There are no jobs in Botswana. That's a fact. You understand? Most employers prefer to hire men than women because loose reasons maybe because some companies for construction, you find that for because it's hard labor. However, which is bombing. I get. Secondly, however, they go for maternity leave because if you go for maternity leave, why am I paying you to go stay with your baby inside the house when I can pay someone who's presently there every day? So people engage in sex work. Both men engage in sex work for those reasons because they are the most hard hit by this thing called poverty. The other thing is people engage in sex work because it has flexible working conditions. No one calls me, Antari, you need to be by the office at 8:30. No one calls me, Ari, there are 4 lines waiting for you. I work on my own accord. And that's for specifically countries that have legalized sex work, Switzerland. But in our case, because here it's not decriminalized, it's a complex issue. I don't openly engage in sex work as I should freely do, because it's an illegal thing to do. And the third reason why people engage in sex work is for the simple mere reason that it's their bodies, body autonomy. You know, I wrote on Facebook, there's a certain gentleman, Isaac Makwala. I don't have anything against him. It was just a random name, because I could use Nigel Amos or whoever. Because, Dikosha, yeah. The issue is, if someone, let's say Michael Jackson, uses their mouth to make money. He was a singer, he made money from just his mouth. His talent is his mouth. We also have Emma Warriors. Emma Warriors won Miss Second Princess Universe, I guess, because Miss World. She was there because she was using her body, she was using her mind to answer those questions. I guess. So both Nigel Amos, Isaac Makwala, they use their feet to run and make money out of those. Their feet, it's part of their body, it's a body organ. So same applies to sex work. You need to, if you are a sex worker, you're going to openly use an organ of your body without your vagina specifically to make those monies. So it's an issue of body autonomy. We don't get to choose what people do with their bodies. But why we don't get to tell them we don't get to choose because it's their body. That's what body autonomy means. And we can't say sex workers are bad people because they use their body. And then there are types of sex work. When I was self-employed, when I stay home, I take calls about from my own phone. There's no link between me and interlink between me and my clients. I deal with my clients directly with my clients. And then there's studio, aka brothels. Sex work has been legalized. Building business block, and then there are rooms in there, proper hygiene, proper everything. You pay, you do whatever you do. That's the second one. And then the third one, the escort services. That did they move on? In fact, they are growing at a very rapid speed. Because the escort services, whenever they stay where they stay, someone calls you for I'm going for a trip in Tanzania. Usually government ministers, I'm sorry to say this. There's someone, I'm going to Tanzania, I need probably 2 girls to accompany me, and then someone calls you, accompany this gentleman to Tanzania. And then you don't directly deal with your clients. And they're just decent people. And then the legality of the matter, sex work. Sex work is not allowed. It's illegal. But the problematic part about the illegality of sex work in Botswana is it targets only the sex workers and not the clients. Because for sex work, someone needs to constantly demand for sex, willing to pay. So if you're going to arrest some lady wearing a skimpy dress called G West and not arrest the guy who's using a government vehicle to stand next to that lady and ask her for sex, then it doesn't make sense because you're not giving anything. If you look at it this way, I don't know what for the illegality of sex work in Botswana, what is it trying to curb? Is it trying to curb HIV/AIDS? Is it trying to curb gender-based violence against women? If you are trying to curb gender-based violence, violence, physical violence, or assault of sexual workers, then you better yet legalize it and then have a monitoring board. Make sure those ladies are safe wherever they are. Make sure there's always someone, not inside the room though, but someone just out there looking out for them. Make sure no one forces a sex worker to have sex without a condom. We are going to have a blowjob and that's it. Make sure those limitations are respected. That's the only way you can regulate both HIV, AIDS, and gender-based violence. So if you say sex work is illegal, we are going to arrest all of you, you're not curbing anything. Because most sex workers, they don't operate along the roads. You understand? The report from the World Health Organization, sex workers in Botswana, there are about 4,000 of them, female sex workers, 4,000. And I think 1,700 specifically from Zimbabwe because of their economic reasons, right? So if there's a large number of those 4,000 people, how could you have 4,000 people along the way? These people stay inside their houses. So you can't arrest, and arrest me and harass sex. Who told you I'm selling sex? Okay, I have a minute which I think I'm going to use to engage on my comrade submissions here. Firstly, they talked about oppression, for sex workers are oppressed, female bodies are disrespected, female bodies should be precious. First and foremost, a precious body or a precious woman is whoever the fuck she wants to be. If you want to be a priest, you're a precious woman. If you want to be a sex worker, you're still a precious woman. If you want to abort babies, you're a precious woman. If you want to have 17 kids, you're still a precious woman. So if you choose to engage in sex work, how precious because someone else is wearing a pencil skirt and going to the office. No, she's not more precious than you. You are both precious. The precious of it all lies on the autonomy of the both of you. Because feminism, it's about choice. It's allowing women to exercise their choice. For now, I want to be a priest, I want to go to school on my hijab, or I want to go to school with my miniskirt. Feminism here. And then he also talked about he said something about love, or people should not have sex outside of love. Sex in this case, ribuaka sex work, which means work. It's work. I don't need to fall in love with being a politician. I do it for mine. I don't need to fall in love with being a lecturer. I do it for mine. So sex work, it's work. And then the concept here, love, is also problematic in this sense. You are convincing yourself that you can't live without this person. Dikosha comes from Silepigo, I come from Sirut. You understand? So we come to Aboroni and convince each other that we love each other. All of a sudden we can't live without each other. The only people I ought to love is my family, my mom and my dad. Others, so the last point, Comrade Chair, gender-based violence in sex work is a form of gender-based violence, right?
No, I didn't mention.
Gender-based violence. sex work is a form of gender-based violence against women because these women are having a lot of sex, blah, 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 blah. The only gender-based violence prevalent in the industry of sex work is a black market, which is currently the situation in Botswana. Because someone takes me from my house, tells me, this is what we are going to do, we are going to have a blowjob, foreplay, blah, blah. This is what we're also going to do for this amount, right? And then when we get kontu, we agreed to have sex condom. And when we get kontu nyahaho, because there's just the two of us, obviously he's a man, he's more physically powerful than I am, then I end up doing stuff saying along. That's how black market gender-based violence flourish. I guess. So the other things I'll keep on saying if I have a chance. Thanks.
Thank you so much, panelists. I think it will be fair that we give them another round of applause. It was quite interesting.
Thank you, sir.